And we're good. We're live. Hey, Jim.
All right. Hey, good morning. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good. Hanging in there.
Welcome to episode 4, everyone. Thanks again for joining us. It's another edition of Jim and Sean Save the World. This time, as you could tell from Jim's background, we are actually recording this on the morning of September 11th, 2020. So Jim was good enough to put his memorial picture up, and we hope everybody who was impacted by the 9/11 gets through this day okay and continue to move forward as we tend and are want to do as human beings. Again, my name is Sean O'Rourke. I'm a cyber liability consultant for Combs & Company, which is an insurance brokerage and consultancy headquartered in New York City, and I essentially prepare companies to be hacked. Jim, it's all yours.
Hi, Jim Mottola, VP of Data Privacy Security and Investigations at Ponemon Compliance Services. Ponemon Compliance Services is a wholly owned subsidiary of Ponemon Bromberg Newman, a regional law firm. And within my practice area, I get to work on lots of interesting things that involve data theft, data breaches, investigations, physical security, as well as various types of things that actually put all those together. And I think that's really today when we talk about our topic, which is insider threat. When I investigate these types of issues, I see a lot of what we're talking about. And I think this is a great topic because one that we've kind of hovered around a few times. But, I'll let you dig into a little bit more for the intro.
Sure. So actually, it is a topic that we have touched on previous videos, which you should all check out because they're all very interesting, very timely, no matter when you're viewing them. And we have fun doing them. So we think you should watch them. Anyway, insider threats. Both of our businesses are a lot of times designed to mitigate or prevent the damage done from either just negligence, which will be a word that you're going to hear quite often during this conversation, or direct efforts at violating or taking advantage of your insider knowledge of a company, their cyber setup, or what have you. And so we decided to do this because there have been a lot of reports, a lot of studies done. And as we begin to really sift through all the cyber incidents and all the damage done in the last, I don't know, let's call it since 2015. Again, we're recording this in 2020. We're beginning to find out that external actors, internal actors, a lot of the focus goes to the external parts, but most of the actual cyber incidents occur because of insiders. And so Jim and I decided that this was a good and relevant topic to talk about. And Jim, being the diligent one of the two of us, actually found a very good and timely report that we're going to reference during this. And he'll mention who produced the report so that we give them proper credit. But Jim, I'm going to start off. Again, you have background, Secret Service, federal investigative experience, and now you're on the private sector for the last, however many years. When you're looking at a cyber incident, are you going in expecting it to be external, or are you thinking internal, or is it a sort of an organic thing that happens once you get in there and you start just digging around?
Yeah, that's really interesting, that perspective, because I really think the first thing we do is on any type of a data issue is we tend to think external. It definitely gets the most press, but I also think it seems to have the most impact because it's usually not just one company. It's some vulnerability that's spread across an environment and multiple users are using the same type of software, hardware, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not one, sometimes maybe just not one threat actor in one particular, against one particular entity. where the insider threat usually is going to affect one company. So,
Right.
And I think, so that's a really good question. I have to tell you, honestly, I generally, when I first get a phone call or, it is kind of focused on external. But I have to tell you, the internal piece always sneaks in at some point. And you learn maybe it's not this incident, but there was somebody who in that business organization who they already thought would do something like this.
Right.
And so sometimes you have to almost refute that in order to kind of figure out what really happened.
Right.
So it's an interesting question, but you're right. It can go back and forth.
So in terms of insider threat, because again, we'll touch on the external threat, but to a certain extent, you and I have beaten that to a pulp on previous videos. So internal, the report that you brought up and that we were discussing just before I hit the record button, if you can let the folks know so that everybody is aware of where this report originates. But there were some interesting numbers that you found when it comes to insider threats. And I think it might have disabused me of a particular notion of those types of threats. So I'm going to turn it over to you to start going through that.
Right. So it's a really interesting report, and I actually just pulled it up this morning really early. 2020 cost of insider threats global report by who other than independently conducted by Ponemon Institute. Right. So there's that to me is a good stamp to have on there, right? They're pretty thorough, and they've been doing these types of reports. And the data breach side for 15, 20 years, it seems, right?
Yeah, they've been around a while.
Right, and it was sponsored by Observe It, which I think they're pretty well known, and a little company called IBM. So you may or may not have heard of. But really, the quick takeaways here is that they went to 204 organizations, and they basically came up with a total number of insider incidents. I believe it was over the course of a year, right? 4,716. Right.
And I want to put that in perspective, because each of those organizations you said had at least 1,000 employees, right?
Yes, at least 1,000 employees. Yeah.
Yep.
So
4,700 incidents across 200, just barely over 200 companies.
Right. So they break this down. The total average cost is about 11.5 million. Okay. So I thought, yeah, okay, fine. I get it, right? I mean, it sounds like kind of a high number, but we know in data breach reporting and security incident reporting, there's definitely you can differentiate between one or the other. This is a kind of a broad category as far as incidents. So I don't know a lost thumb drive or somebody sending emails outside the organization, right? It's probably a very wide amount of information, or incidents that they're kind of drawing from. Right. I didn't get too deep into the report, but I'm going to definitely delve more into it. But here are the things that I thought were interesting. All right, 62% of those incidents were in regards to employee negligence. Right, 23% were incidents related to insider criminality. Okay, and 14% of those incidents were related to credential theft. Right? So we put that in so if it's really if you're looking at that credential theft is the one that causes the most financial damage.
Sure.
Why? Well, we're talking about IP, data privacy issues, right? It's now those costs. Now you can take their other report and stick it together and say, okay, what's the cost of a digital asset?
Yep.
Multiply it by X, and that's where you come up with that kind of. So you can see the highest impact, of course, would be access to the most data, the most information, right? Which has its own value. So, those types of things are interesting. But again, I think if we look at it, and then overall, they even compared external and internal threats. And in their summary, they said that the majority of issues were caused by insider threat. I believe it was 63%.
Yeah.
Versus like 36%, 37% from external criminality. So that, to me, is kind of the one that really shows us that real, that the majority of those. So let's just break it down. The majority of these were of threats perpetrated by insiders. The majority of those by negligence.
Right. And negligence is a broad.
Right.
The negligence could have been anything. I clicked on an attachment I shouldn't have. I forwarded an email I shouldn't have. I got snookered by a business email fraud. Again, that's a very broad topic. It doesn't mean that the criminality part, and this is where you disabused me of the notion. I thought the criminality part would be higher. But when you think about it, it kind of makes sense then that the negligence would be higher. And probably that's good news to a certain extent when you're looking at this. Even though it sucks if it happens to you, less often it's based on criminal intent and more just it's maybe a lack of training, a lack of awareness for the employee and whatnot. Yeah,
I mean, again, it's this, of all these attacks, analysis of insider incidents, total of 2,962 attacks, or 62% pertain to employer or contractor negligence. Criminal malicious insiders caused another, 1,000 attacks, 23%. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I guess let's, again, this is a good report. Dig through it, take a look at it, and I mean, there's a lot of information there, but.
We'll provide a link to the report in the video description just below, so everybody can take a look at it. So to that end, we're obviously, as we mentioned, we're recording this in September of 2020. We're still in the middle of a bit of COVID-19 mania. It might have died down a little bit from when we recorded previous videos. But
I don't think so. I think we're about to eclipse 200,000 souls lost.
Yeah,
and then we're still losing 1,000 people a day. So it's been tough. Buddy.
Yeah, but I think even the media. Well, we won't get into that. We're gonna let it
go. That's a different podcast, dude.
Yeah, that's a different cast entirely. Anyway, one of the things we did talk about, and both of us have seen, unfortunately, is that this new work from home mantra has seemed to have eroded people's awareness of what not to do when it comes to technology, which is why, if anybody has been paying attention, there's such a huge increase in ransomware, business email fraud, and other types of cyber incidents.
Yeah, I think because your whole process has now changed, right? If you think about what's the basis for creating a good insider risk, policy within a business, right? It's going to start with a couple of things. It's going to start with some sort of training, all right? Well, it actually starts with a policy. You got to have some sort of a policy. I'll even take it back one step from there. I think it starts with a culture. Okay, it starts with how do you set the culture in your company on how to hire the right people, right? Yeah. So that's a selection process, right? That is focused on background, looking at financial risk, and these are things that we do too as security investigations group. Look at insider. We look at the backgrounds. If you're hiring a CFO or somebody like that, or somebody's gonna have a lot of access to information or be able to move money around, let's start looking at their backgrounds. Verifying a resume, financial stressors, right? Verifying references. So that's a start. And then think things like random drug testing, right? Updating background policies. Then we go right into a policy for that, and then a policy for how to do things. Not to leave laptops in cars. I mean, these are but now laptops are in your house. So what are you going to tell people? You must have an alarm system at your house. I mean, this is the situation where you don't want to give admin controls to somebody so that there's no screen lock on their laptop if they're doing that. But if they're working from home using their own device, how do you regulate that, right? This is exactly what you talked about. So there's so many issues that you can't enforce at home that you could try to enforce at work. Are you supposed to create a whole new set of policies from work from home now?
Yeah, like IT doesn't have enough trouble just dealing when you're in the office. Well, so before we came on, you and I were chatting about how we wanted this to go, but you had the best example because I know people do it on a daily basis. I'll let you tell it since it's your example.
Okay, so it's the classic, I can't print this document. I need to read it on my work laptop because I don't know the Wi-Fi password to the stupid printer. So I'm going to just email this to my Google account and then print it from my Google account because
that machine's connected to the printer.
And I'm an Apple guy at home, but I'm a Windows guy at work. Yep. So you're right. This is the classic situation. So, and trust me, we've even had issues like this where, we work a lot with schools, right? And they work on, for the most part, it's the G Suite or, Google platform. And I can't exchange a Google Sheet with a client. So I have to go in and out, and I just have to request IT to give me access so I can download that Google Sheet. So would I say, hey, just send it to my personal address? It's easier, and as humans, we're going to do it easier.
Right.
So that's it. And when I'm at home and I'm in my flip-flops, I'm not feeling the same. I'm not feeling the same way as when my Brooks brothers were pinching my feet. So.
Sure. Well, it's a cost-benefit analysis, and really, sure. the cost is an annoyance. I mean, we've mentioned this on videos. The more convenient a technology is or a process is, the less secure it is. And I think it's almost inversely proportional. So if it's 2 times easier, it's 4 times less secure. So in that vein, that's kind of what's happening now. So to the negligence point, how do you think people can mitigate it? And I'm going to let you fire first because how do companies mitigate that kind of risk?
I think we talked a little bit. I think it's you got to be proactive, right? I think it's a couple of things, right? We talked about setting a culture of security awareness. From the moment you onboard to that company, they need to know that you're serious about doing background checks and about validating information on resumes. Start from there. Policy, you need to have a policy, right in place when folks come in. Random drug testing, I think is a good policy, right? You've got to be, of course, now there's different things with medical marijuana and such, and legalization of that. You've got to be, that's something that for HR to do. But I think it's also, the employees have to look at the policies every year and sign them. Then I think it's training. I think a lot of it, what I see,
big time,
people just don't know, what's considered IP, like, so data classification, what's IP, what's business critical, what's business sensitive, what can you release to who, and what platform do you release it, how do you exchange information with folks outside. It's building a system of information security and data privacy, but instilling that as a business process through policies and procedures. However, as I try to get my breath here, you need to have some oversight. You have to set some controls in place, right? As you know, in IT perspective, you got to set some controls in place, and you have to monitor what's going on.
Yes,
that is a heavy lift, right?
And I apologize to all the IT departments out there, but you do have to monitor. You have to log activity, and you have to enforce those policies. A lot of times, the policies are in place, people will violate them, and IT is like,
Well, how many alerts can you set up? How many red flags can you set up? How do you respond to that? Yeah. What's important? What's not important? Right? I mean, how do you discern? Was it a SIM, right, or a SOC? How do you figure out? Like, how do you do that as a small business? Do you outsource it? Do you try to do it yourself? But I think any investigation that I've been involved with, I can tell you, 9 point 99 times out of 10, it involves a piece of information.
Yeah.
Either it was false piece of information that was given, a piece of stolen information. It's always data, data, data. Unusual behavioral activities, right? Those are the things that I think you have to look for and monitor. And there's lots of algorithms and softwares out there that does that. But you have to pay attention to that. But I also think that you have to kind of get on top of it when it happens, right? You just can't let it go, let it go, let it go, because I can tell you that every investigation I've ever worked, it starts little and it just keeps on going up and up and up and up. Oh, we knew it was a problem. We should have said something. Yeah, we knew this. We know there's been some issues, and it's never documented.
Right. Well,
right?
And that's what always annoys me when I go into a client's. So insurance, cyber insurance is one of the key pieces of any resiliency or response plan to a cyber incident. But part of the problem is that carriers, especially carriers who are going to cover the companies that you referenced in that report, carriers are going to look at, okay, they're going to ask the exact same questions that you asked. And if they find out, well, yeah, we knew about it, but we weren't enforcing the policies, the carriers are going to say, click, check, click, and say, claim denied, because you didn't carry through on what you set up in place and what you said on the application that you were going to do. And I'm beginning to see a lot of times that that's what the carriers are going to use. The carriers aren't going to deny you a claim if you do take the proper steps. What they're going to deny you the claim on is when you don't, and you don't follow through, and you don't do the work that you said you were going to do. And it is hard. Believe me, I know it's hard. But there's just no choice in the matter at this point.
Yeah, I think you have to document. I think it's about transparency. This is why you have corporate counsel, and you have, you hire counsel from outside and other firms like ours that come in and do these types of things. Because that's the other thing too. I see internal investigations sometimes get very personal. Oh, I know so and so, they wouldn't do this, or I have a grudge against somebody, and I ear off on a wild goose chase, right? But the data isn't going to lie. The logs are not going to lie unless someone steals a password and they're sharing credentials, which I've also seen, which creates a real mess, all right? Because that credential is maybe shared by an entire floor of people, and I worked in investigation overseas, and that's what happened. And they were, it was really difficult to figure that out, but we did. And I talked to the CSO and the CISO, and I mean, they were on top of their stuff. But when a company is 10,000, 20,000 people, it's hard to monitor. So the thing is, my thing is, you got to. They had set up alerts, and they were on top of it. They did a really good job. But they had the resources to do that, even in an organization like that. What I'm saying is they documented it. Hey, we saw this. It seemed like it was it didn't seem right that credential was being used by somebody who had left the company. We saw that, so we didn't go in and delete the account, but they realized at some point in an audit of their own that something was wrong. So that was good, but then they documented. What did they do? They called the employee in, they wrote it up, they disciplined the employee, put a letter in their file. That's the kind of stuff you have to do, because really, Sean, with this insider threat stuff, really it comes down to, yes, it's exfiltration of data, it's money leaving, right? It's always a resource that they're stealing. They could be stealing time, they could be stealing money, they could be stealing data. Whatever it is that the person is trying to take, right? Yep. At the end of the day, it's usually going to end up in some sort of a separation, right? Some sort of a firing, and you need to have all your ducks in a row when you get to that point. Yeah, a lot of people are at will, but you need, everybody's very litigious too. So I think you need. So if you talk about a way to mitigate this. If people know that it was an accident, right? Or it was intense, yes, it was a violation of policy. A violation of policy shouldn't just be poo-pooed. Yeah. Because it's
at every level. It's got to be consistently enforced. You can't fire the administrator if you're not going to fire her boss, who is actually the one really sharing the credentials or not following policies and procedures. That's when you get into real HR litigated trouble.
Yeah, but that goes back to what you said before, is that, it starts, where do you start? Well, it starts with culture.
Yep.
That's okay. You know what? Hey, I know Sean doesn't work here anymore, but you know what? We need to work on a client account. Just use his credentials.
Yep.
And that's the type of stuff. So, I mean, all the stuff we're talking about is not so sophisticated from a technology standpoint, right? Apart from the monitoring, that's hard to do, I think, for the businesses I work with. They may not have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
But there are automated systems that you can set up. There is logging tools that you can use that will provide you alerts. And most of these logging tools now have some sort of AI backend that is looking at the traffic, trying to discern patterns, trying to detect unusual activity. And I think, especially now, since people are distributed and not in the office, you have to know what's going on when they're accessing data or systems, when they're connecting to the internet. You need to know if there is some sort of risk to your data, because you mentioned it could be 10 to 20,000 employees. It could be 10 to 20 employees. It's the exact same situation. It's just at a different level, but it doesn't mitigate or doesn't remove your liability to do these steps, to take these steps to make sure that you minimize the risk to your business. Because look, we mentioned this before, two of the most famous insider threats, and we're not going to get into the political aspects of them, exfiltrations, were Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning. Now, Snowden was a contractor who had access. Chelsea Manning worked for the military. Chelsea Manning was taking this stuff out on disks that she had ripped. I mean, this was back in the day. She wasn't even using USB drives. Disks that she had ripped the data onto. There should have been logs saying all this data was just copied onto a disk with an alert that said, was that allowed? Because she really didn't have authority to do that. But she had access because they didn't, to your point, they didn't have access control systems. They weren't being diligent about it. But the one that I really think is more pertinent to the audience probably watching us is the hacker who compromised Capital One's database. And she didn't work for Capital One. She didn't work for anybody at the time of the hack, but she used to work for Amazon Web Services, which is where Capital One kept the server that was compromised. And she knew by experience what security features companies usually forgot to turn on, and she knew how to exploit them. So just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean all of a sudden you're fully secured from everything. The cloud actually makes it more complicated for what we're talking about in terms of monitoring and tracking, but it also does give you better insights and more control over who can and cannot access something, because usually it's just web-based. And you can turn those on with a check of a checkbox.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that with for Pace University, that cybersecurity certificate program. I don't know if you saw, that was on the cloud, and I learned a lot. It was because you're right. I mean, they were talking about cloud access security brokers, and it's a whole new landscape. So yeah, I think that's it. But if everybody's working on the cloud, really we all are, right? I mean, there's nothing on this box anymore, and what's on it is it's minimal.
Think of the data being transmitted right now between your machine and Zoom, my machine and Zoom. I record this locally. I don't record it to the Zoom cloud because of what I do with it subsequently. But I mean, there's a tremendous amount of activity going on right now, back and forth.
Sure, not to mention all the devices that are laying around us. Hey Siri. See, I know you turned yours off.
Oh yeah.
But I think we should really kind of look too. Is she finally? I don't know what that is. That was unexpected.
See, that's why I love recording these live. By the way, folks, we don't edit these. We recorded these live.
I told you it was listening.
And we go for it.
I don't even know where little baby and 42 Doug are. I'll have to ask somebody else in my house.
Yes.
So,
but that was perfect. That was just awesome.
I don't know where everything else is. But to your, and I think the dog is over here, but he's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
So I think the thing we surely should kind of focus on now is that the part where it's the unintentional negligence, which I think the majority of them are, and I think a lot of it is negligence, but it's also maybe willful negligence. Yeah, you know what? I know that's a rule, or a policy, but I'm going to push it because I got to get something done, or I just don't care, right? Or just completely blindly not knowing, is one thing. But now let's talk about the ones that you're talking about. This intentional criminality, right? And this the more sophisticated ones, because those are the ones that get the headlines. I think the one that you spoke about is a really good one, especially when it comes to data, and how does something like that? How do we watch the watchmen, right? Do audits? How do we do that from a really sophisticated technological standpoint, especially when it comes into the cloud?
Well, at the moment, there's somebody somewhere working on a new tool, but that's part of the problem, is that every day, and I see this in my old IT firm, which I left at this point almost 5 years ago. They have gone through, a dozen new tools, new monitoring tools, new management tools, new security tools, new penetration testing tools, new vulnerability scan tools, new antivirus, malware, exploit tools, whatever else. At least a dozen in 5 years. And one of the reasons is because the tools come out and they're better than what exists. And then the bad guys get smart and find new exploits and what have you. But for whatever reason, the new tool doesn't always sort of stay up to date. So then there's another new tool that comes out that does maybe 10% more or 5% more. But what's happening is it's an arms race now, and you have to do that 5% more. Because if you don't do the 5% more, well, again, to my point, then it's 10% less secure if you don't do the 5% more. And so it's a constant arms race. What they have found, though, for the clients who allow them to do it, because, again, my IT firm is an outsourced third-party firm, so there's obviously some concern as to what happens in that. Where an internal IT team, I think they'd be more comfortable with, is an auditing. And when I mean auditing, I don't mean necessarily that I come in after the situation like you do and audit and go through and try to figure out what happens. They actually audit on the fly, and they try to track everything that is happening. It goes back to the point that I made before. There are engines behind it that are trying to discern patterns. So I see Jim's usually in XYZ folders, doesn't usually print. If he does, it's usually to the machine on the third floor, let's say. And he sends emails. He sends an average of 200 emails a day. Well, now all of a sudden on your machine, there's a large job that got printed to the fifth floor. Or you started sending 400 emails a day.
Yeah, those are right. Those are things that are going to be red flags. But I also think now this is a good point that someone else made, and I don't know if you heard this argument before. Our work hours have changed, right? So there's a transition point where what I do, if I'm up at 5 a.m. sometimes, I try not to send emails at that hour, okay? But I might be working. And it might be on a weekend. I work with attorneys, and I have to tell you, they work a lot of hours. And but I do agree with you that we all still only do the same. We only go the same places. we probably, at some point, we send emails to the same groups, the same contacts, right? So there is some sort of behavioral aspect to this, but you have to have data for that. But then you've got to set these rules to notify you when it's outside of that. And I guess is that kind of the magic here, is figuring out what.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that'd be hard.
Yeah, it is hard because, one, you don't control the AI engine, so you can't make adjustments. Let's treat it as a car. So you can't open the hood and try to get maybe 10 more horsepower out of it. You got to rely on the vendor and give them feedback and say, hey, I needed to be able to do this, because to your point right now, everything's really disjointed from a time standpoint, especially for folks who have kids, who the kids may not be back in physical school. And even if they are, they're probably not back full time. So their work schedules are all out of sorts. Granted, they're probably still accessing the same folders, the same emails are going out, but they may be going out. The access may be happening a different way that the IT department or company has to now take into account to start creating a new pattern of usage.
But aren't they busy enough?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, you will never, ever hear me sort of say an IT department doesn't have enough to do. I think part of the problem is that, though, to your point, they don't get uniform marching orders because there's not a uniform policy or procedure in place that they can just point to and say, okay, this is priority number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, this is number 4, and this is where we all focus. What they get is that Jim calls and says, I need administrative access because I have to download this program. Or I downloaded this program and then now it's not working. Or I can't print, or I can't email. And I need you to fix it right now because I'm in the middle of a project and I got to get it done. And I'm not saying you do that. You just happen to be in.
No, I have been. Even myself, I have been known to try to change things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially this recent thing that we're doing. I talked this recent product.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I mean, I had to daisy chain a number of different technologies together in order to use this for a CRM, right? The platform for the assessments that we're sending out. And even just, and we have school clients and they're on G Suite primarily, and then the other companies we're working with, we're on Outlook, so I mean, we're working inside of a secure platform, but I need to be outside too. Yep. So it's just, and sometimes I'll say, this is not a security issue, this is a control issue. It has nothing to do with security. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's kind of the push and pull. And maybe I'm not the most forceful about this because I tend to say, okay, I get it, but can you guys, I need to do this. And I think that's the whole issue here, right? On the negligence part. I need to perform a business function. I can't have a restrictive environment, so restrictive that nothing comes or goes, right? And but we want to monitor it, and we want to hire good people, and we want to make sure that we're protecting our clients' information, our information. It is a real tough one because, to your point, with the Amazon issue and the people that know how to work their way around the system are the people that have been there the longest.
Yes.
If you want to talk to
institutional knowledge,
you'll go in and I will ask, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, we knew that was going to happen. Oh yeah, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. I can tell you exactly how to get around that." They know because humans, for lack of, I guess a better summary on the human race. Okay, we are really good at getting around stuff. We have really figured out. We're creative because we had to be, right? Mm-hmm. And we like shortcuts, and now that we have no attention spans, we want to get stuff done faster than ever before. So I'm going to find the quickest way between here and there, right? And I don't, and was it break everything, right? Whatever, what is it with Mark Zuckerberg, right? Go fast, break stuff.
Yep.
Right, but in our DNA, we know how to do workarounds. And if you're in the environment long enough, you'll figure out how to get that workaround done. And the problem is that some people take advantage of that. And
right, but there's also consequences to those workarounds now from a cyber perspective, because if you can figure out the workaround, somebody else can figure out the workaround too, and how to exploit it, whether it be from the inside or the outside.
Well, this is why email continues to be the biggest point of contact.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because and we talk about this, the threat actor gets access to the email, gets access to a system, and now they what do they do when they get in?
Well, for the first part, they just watch, and if they're
exactly
smart,
they become the insider.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But with a purpose, with a real focus.
Yep.
So, that's it. And I think that's what we're talking about on the insider negligence issue. It's some sloppiness and policy issues. But on the criminality point, it's really comes to an opportunity, right? There's some stressors that could come into play. There's a rationalization why people are going to do things. And then there is the opportunity. So you kind of have to limit the opportunities for this to happen, because things happen and people do things that they right.
The very famous line, that's why there's erasers on pencils. We all know we're going to make mistakes. Look, I made a bonehead one a couple of weeks ago. I'm not on Instagram a lot, but I did go on, and somebody had sort of spoofed a friend of mine, and I thought, okay, he just changed his display name, but it wasn't him. And I added him, and then I had to go back and I deleted him and the whole crap. And I was annoyed, but I realized, hey, this is a good teaching moment, because I didn't do my homework. I didn't even bother to click on the picture to see any posts or whatnot, because if he had changed his username, his post would still be there. So I was annoyed. My wife laughed at me because I dropped a few 4-letter words when I realized what I had done, because then I had to go back and undo what I'd broken. But I think that's what people have to do, to your point, and we're almost at an hour at this point, because again, these are fun conversations and they're important conversations for people. But to your point, culturally, it's got to be serious, because while we talk about the threats to the business in terms of the loss of money, we haven't even brought up the legal implications or the regulatory implications. Or if somebody like Jim in his former life come knocking on your door, and all of a sudden there's a lot of stuff going on that the news is going to report, there's reputational damage done to you. So you've got to make this a part of your culture, and then you've got to figure out, how can we afford to watch it? And I don't care what size business you are, you have to figure out how to monitor your environment and monitor what your users are doing, and then train them on how to do things better.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think this is a conversation that we should probably break up into 2 parts, because it is a little bit longer. And I would almost suggest that the next time we talk, we might want to even get into social engineering, because that has a lot to do with this too. It can be one person, right? But it could be also a person that has some knowledge.
Well, and to your point, knowledge is power.
Yeah, I mean, or someone who allows somebody to write over permission, gives them exception to do something. So, but anyway.
Yeah, we could keep going on and on about this, because we've just scratched the surface. I don't know what our next conversation will be. I have a couple ideas based on some incidents that have happened in the last couple of weeks, but Jim and I will talk about that offline, not right now. Because guess what, viewer? You don't get a vote. You have to wait. You have to be surprised.
They do get the vote. They get to follow or not follow.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's true.
What are we up to? What are we up to about?
I have no idea. I'd have to go look.
Well, I appreciate.
You know what? The beginning of September has been kind of busy, and then all of a sudden I've lost track of actually doing some of my other duties and whatnot, and I was brought back to reality because people were back to a normal schedule, and it's like, hey, I got to get ready for a video shoot and whatnot.
We are going to see. I really do. I'll wrap up my little piece on the insider threat, and then we can go. But just as an observation, I do think that the reason we did a number of investigations at the end of last spring, pretty insider threat issues that were not specifically digitally related, like digital harassment or like Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts. We've done a number of those types of investigations, right? And none of those have come up to be insider threats at this point, but we have a couple that may be. Long story short, I think now that people are going back to work and physically in a space, I think we'll probably see some of that as well. Plus, you think of all the people that are out of work, and they may be rift. And so I think we're going to see the worst confluence of work from home, work at work, insider threat, right? The IT guys are going to be pulling their hair out because, people are going to be basically co-locating, and I think it's going to be a very interesting fall for these types of things. I would be on the lookout for a few of these that really percolate to the top very soon, because people are starting to look a little deeper now. They've gotten used to the new normal. They're going to start to probably do audits and look backs, and I think we're going to see some reporting of some stuff.
Well, to your point, I'm glad I'm out of the day-to-day IT game. I'll be honest with you.
Sure.
I do not want that responsibility at this point. It's just too much going on. And this will be another topic that we might bring up. It's another example of why I do not like the bring your own device policy at companies. I know it's more expensive, but I think every company should have control of their own devices, and you make an employee carry 2 phones then.
You don't think mobile device management works?
No. Nope.
All right. Well, that's another topic.
Too many court cases shown that there's no way to truly delineate on that device, and
really?
I am now of a firm belief that there should be a work device and then a personal device, and never shall the twain meet, because there's too much going on both of those devices, and it's very hard to control or separate, because there's no such thing as a Chinese wall on a digital device. It's all one and the same. I don't care if you have different accounts or whatever the mobile management is. It just doesn't work. But we'll get to that.
Okay.
That could be part of another conversation. Jim, fun as always. Thank you very much. Again, I want to thank all the viewers for joining us. If you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button below along with the bell so that you'll get notifications when Jim and I do our next round. And also, if you want to see this in its continuity, I've created a playlist called Everything Cyber, and that's where all the videos will be. So just subscribe to the playlist and you'll get all these videos as I upload them. And this one hopefully will go up in about a week from the posting. But Jim, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Until next time, you be well, and same to everybody who's watching this. Bye.
Okay, right back at you. Thanks, Sean. Take care.